There was a crowd of the most hardened surgeons and nurses and anybody you could think of standing around crying.
What is the most interesting case you had as a doctor?
We had a little girl, I think she was about 11 years old. Her name was Shigela, first word, which was, she was a black girl. Anyway, she was beaten half to death by her mother's live-in and brought to the hospital more dead than alive. And we operated, we took out some killed brain, we took out a big blood clot and did a tracheostomy. And I mentioned the tracheostomy because that's the key to the rest of this. Everybody on the service got to love this little girl. She was cheerful, she was an absolute sweetheart. You know, we would all come in and we'd give her a hug in the morning. And then she was breathing on her own, so we had decided it was time for the trach tube to come out, breathing tube. At the time, I was the chief resident. The first year resident got to do the scut work, so it was his job to go in and take out the tracheostomy. He started taking it out, and all of a sudden he got a lot of blood coming out of the tube. And so he called me, and I said, stick the tube all the rest of the way back in, and he did, and so they were able to get the blood out, and so she was breathing. So it became my job. You know, when you're the captain of the ship, you get to do the real scut work. So I came in and I untied the attachments so that I could take it out, and all of a sudden this fountain of blood bigger than my thumb started going out, pumping, you know, like aorta. So I stuck my finger, I think I stuck my finger in my left hand because I knew I could have to. I found the site, and I knew, because I could tell the anatomy, that it was the subclavian artery, and that's one of the first branches of the aorta. That stopped her bleeding, and I sucked her out, and she could then make a little sound, and she said, "Am I going to be okay?" And I said, "Shigela, I love you. I will do all that I can." And so I called down, or I had somebody call down to the operating room to get a thoracic surgeon and an operating room. And we were bringing down what we called an elevator case, as fast as the elevator can go. And the head nurse, her name was Mrs. Reynolds, who was just one of my very best friends ever, said, "We don't have one. And we don't have a thoracic surgeon. We don't have a vascular surgeon. We don't have a general surgeon. It's like a bomb went off someplace in Dallas and every operating room is full. I'm sorry, Doug, you are on your own." And I said, "Right, I've got my finger in a little girl's trachea, and if I take it out, she'll die." He says, "I can't help you. I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll set you up an area to work in the hall." And I said, "Well, find me some breathing body to come and help." So I went down there, and she had found a medical student, not a surgical anything. He was just some guy who happened to be in the emergency room, aghast at what was going on. Anyway, I rushed down there, and I took the tube out for a moment, tried to put in an endotracheal tube. Again, didn't stop the bleeding. I had to put my finger back in again. By that time, she'd lost probably 500 cc's of blood. Too much for a little girl. And so I got a thoracotomy tray. Fortunately, I'd done thoracotomies, but this was the hardest one on earth because, one, I only had one hand. Two, it was right underneath where I had to go, was right underneath the clavicle. So it was as obnoxious and difficult a spot there was in the world. I mean, it was battlefield surgery at the best. So I made an incision underneath the clavicle, and I scraped and moved, and I took out the first rib and opened it up, and I could see, by that point in time, I could see the subclavian artery. And there was just too many hands needed. I just did not have enough hands to do it. And so I called Mrs. Reynolds. I said, please, I beg you, no matter what anybody's doing, it can't be as important as this. Get me a thoracic surgeon. So they did get one, and he came in and he started to put clamps on the artery so I could get my finger out of the trachea, which I could no longer feel. And by then we had a whole crowd around, and everybody just sort of cheering. It's like when you got lost miners down in the deep depths of the mine, everybody's cheering to get them better. Well, you know, talk about between grim and worse. He put the clamps on and then said, I can't do anything with your finger there. And so I said, well, I'll try it. And I took it out, and I don't know. God didn't like me that day. That vessel blew to pieces, and there was no place to put a clamp, and I watched her bleed to death. And there was a crowd of the most hardened surgeons and nurses and anybody you could think of standing around crying. We took her back up to her bed in the room and made her look decent, and I had to tell the mother what had happened. There's only one good thing came out of it. The mother's sperm donor had never been charged with anything. And so we fought, and we got him charged with murder, and he was convicted. That's the only good thing that came out of that. And I'll tell you, I can smell the smells, I can see, I can hear everything that went on. That is imprinted someplace permanent in my brain. A lot of people don't think neurosurgery is a great career. It had its elations when we saved somebody, but it also had its naders when everything turned to crap. We referred to those as train wrecks.
Carl, thank you for that story.